crack the magnetic field, we're going to part number 2. So I've said before that when they cracked the magnetic field, my brother-in-law saw a flashing bright star during the day while the fires were going in Spanish Fork. They can charge the fiber optic lasers for free when the magnetic field is cracked open and the solar plasma is flowing in, and direct it. Otherwise, the natural phenomenon is something more like what you saw with the straight line burning across the field, where a magnetic flux line is moving across the ground. And I think in some cases, they're actually directing it out into the rural areas in the wilderness so that it doesn't ground out. This could just be a natural filament grounding out right here between the earth and the sky, or it could be directed. But I believe there is evidence of what appears to be both. Non-directed random energy and directed energy.
Look at those saplings down there. They didn't burn.
Is he talking about the people here, the saplings?
The vehicles, the cars are completely
How dare he
melted,
talk about them like that?
And yet these little twigs and stuff, they didn't burn. And yet the fire was supposed to have reached the cars from the trees.
How dare he?
Look at this car, it's melted into the road.
And that's the other thing. We might have an explanation why these cars were all flipped over in some of these fires. Here's an example. How did it get up there? Maybe the person drove it up there. But in some of these fires, right where they were parked, they were flipped 180 degrees. And if magnetic flux lines are moving under the ground in current, in oscillating waves, and you get a positive over here and a negative over here, I'll bet people that watched these cars flip over, watched them go flip 180 degrees so quick, they could hardly even see it. And it immediately stopped. It didn't keep tumbling, because just like when you push two magnets together and it flips the other magnet 180 degrees very quickly and then stops it just as quickly, I'll bet that's how these cars moved. From the electromagnetic flux lines moving under the ground with these types of fires.
Even the tarmac and the road is melted, given way. And yet the trees have still got bark on them, look. Now this is a directed energy weapon.
A Dusky that hits the engine compartment the hardest. On all of them.
The engine's completely exposed.
Right, the engine on all of them gets hit hardest.
Branches all perfectly intact.
Hey, this guy's talking over me. He needs to shut up.
Burnt away.
Well, I tell you about the engine compartment hit on all of them the hardest.
The road. Okay,
yeah.
This is directed energy.
The Dusky.
Microwave beam weapon.
Microwave beam weapon.
Above.
I gotta add my bloviation so that I can... The rust color. Notice the rust. How did it rust instantly?
Brought down the Twin Towers.
On the outside even. On the inside, everywhere. That was a perfectly painted car.
Since at least the 1920s. They've been sitting on it, keeping it
The technology, he means, since the 20s. That car is brand new. So are all those cars. Brand new, but rusted. Fire doesn't rust cars.
Intact.
Microwaves do. Electrolysis.
Look at that. All those leaves are still on the trees.
All the twigs over here.
And yet the intense heat was so intense.
See? And the leaves on the trees. And the intense heat on the vehicle. I'm narrating. What? I'm narrating. My people can't hear it. I gotta translate for my people. It's a truther thing. You wouldn't understand. All the greenery.
And again, look, we have the trees perfectly intact.
More greenery.
Not damaged.
Greenery.
The leaves are all there.
Not greenery.
And yet the vehicle completely incinerated.
Highly ungreen.
Road destroyed.
Double plus ungreen.
All the surfaces. Looks like they just run a beam along there.
A laser.
Kept the beam going as it's gone down the road.
Much like the fiber optics, where I saw that where these fiber optic cables run, which run right under the road oftentimes, it lasered the fiber optic cable buried here sign, the piece of plastic. In my very first plasma fire, I found this on the ground like that with ash, completely turned to ash in this part of it. Like the fiber optic cable runs this way underground. And this thing was sticking up at the edge of the trench, which is that where they always do it, so you can not dig it up. And it fell over and got lasered by the sheet of energy that was going up and down on that fiber optic cable, just like on that road where they probably have fiber optic cable under the road. It had a curtain of energy, which is what it took to turn this to ash, because it's very hard, durable material there. Still hard here, completely ash in between. So the curtain of energy that went down right there where the fiber optic cable is buried below. This thing was on the edge of a trench that went here, fell over, and got lasered to pure ash in the middle. Just like this bloke here was saying happened right there on that road.
Trees perfectly intact. They should have been destroyed. So that was from RT. Let's have a look at the Gatlinburg footage. So here we're going to see the Gatlinburg. Again, this is a drone tour of the damaged area. Okay, same format. A drone tour.
Channel 5's Chris Conti, photojournalist. Our team coverage.
Here we go. Okay, aerial tour, same thing. Similar sort of terrain, right? Mountainous trees and stuff. Same format.
Tennessee's deadliest wildfire began. It is harsh, unforgiving terrain, and it is
Blah-de-blah.
moisture for months. The iconic get untouched.
Now look at this. Look, you can see, can't you? Trees a bit damaged here, but around the trees have even got
The
leaves.
houses are turned to ash in between the
And
trees.
yet the houses have completely been destroyed. Completely. This looks like sort of cement or... But anyway.
So for fire to reach this house, it would have had to burn the fuel leading up to the house, and there is no such evidence of such burning. All the fuel around the house, around the entire house, on both of them, is still intact and did not burn. But the houses themselves to the ground.
They're completely destroyed.
Super intense heat burned the house. Nothing on the trees.
Black, but who knows? Maybe for some freaky reason they got white ash all over them. Yeah, the trees. Have still
That's
got
white
leaves on them,
phosphorus.
branches and twigs.
He mentioned the white ash, and I believe it's Jamie Lee that says that's white phosphorus. Maybe even Daniel Alexander. And it's something that only happens in these super intense heat fires.
What I'm saying is that the heat originated here and then slightly singed the surrounding area. It did not reach the houses from the surrounding area, because the surrounding area would have had to be completely incinerated. And then they're untouched, as he says. Highly selective.
Destroyed the skylift, sparing the chairs themselves, but destroying the...
Look at this tree here. This should have had its leaves and little branches burnt off, and yet it's intact, and yet the ground... What's he saying?
Wheelhouse. Dollywood remains unscathed, while community and the chairs themselves, but destroying the wheelhouse. The fire almost destroyed the skylift, sparing the chairs themselves, but destroying the wheelhouse.
Destroyed the wheelhouse. Another house completely destroyed. Just like in 9/11, it works selectively on whatever...
What he's saying is there's an entire structure missing from right here that you could walk into and sit on the chairlift before it takes you off. And so right here, there was an entire house-sized structure, yet the trees right next to it are still standing. But the house is gone. And notice how much more highly intense it burned right here than over here on the edges. And to burn that much more intense right there is another indicator of what we're looking at.
Material, they dial it to effect. It's infrasound, it's a frequency thing. The trees, they were probably burnt by the heat radiating off the focus of the directed energy beam, which was the building here, which completely flattened, destroyed.
Dollywood remains unscathed, while communities above have disappeared. into
Dollywood,
obscurity.
Nashville,
Look at this. These houses
Gatlinburg,
completely
Tennessee.
destroyed. Very focused. Only on the houses.
And they're all turned white
See,
with
all
that
the
white
trees
ash.
around, intact. Houses destroyed. Very, very
Valley
focused.
Village and along Ski Mountain
This is a concrete car park.
no longer exists.
Nothing to burn there, and yet it's been
This is a
destroyed.
place where most people lost their lives.
This is concrete.
I've seen plenty of these where the concrete, the rebar is exposed from within the concrete because the rebar within the concrete catches those vibrations that he was just referring to as infrasound, the microwave stuff. The rebar within the concrete catches it like an antenna, vibrates at such a frequency that it completely turns the concrete around it to dust. And you see remaining the bare rebar that was buried in the concrete. After these fires go through, I saw that in the more recent Nashville explosion.
Brick that's burnt and destroyed.
And then there's this, the Westgate Resort, where at least 2 people were trapped in an
The
elevator.
entire resort completely destroyed.
Only half the resort still stands. The damage from this one spot looms over downtown Gatlinburg. You cannot truly understand
Loads of
the
trees still
devastation
standing. Look at that.
unless you see it with your own eyes.
Trees, all these little thin little twiggy bits, they would have gone straight away
The twiggy
in that
bits.
kind of heat.
Close to 2,000
And yet the houses, the trees, all the trees down here, totally intact, unharmed, everywhere, surrounding them.
homes and businesses
So this was our 9/11, and we still haven't even soaked it in. It's been 2 years.
destroyed.
This place destroyed.
I've spoken of whether or not you've digested information. I went over that in a recent video. And I said, did you hear me? Yes, I know you heard me, but have you digested it? No, you haven't really digested this heavy information. This was our 9/11 that we don't even know happened yet. We're still digesting it. Most people don't know. Add to that the Las Vegas shooting and many more instances. But this was round the world and is ongoing and coincides with the pole shift. But these are apparently directed, as it was in Paradise, California, where we saw Cal Fire standing on the back of a pickup truck, like this truck right here, standing on the back of a pickup truck with a 50 caliber rifle propped up on the top of the cab, pointed out in front of the truck, on a tripod that sat on the top of the cab, and the guy was standing here in the back of the truck. He wasn't looking through the scope. He had the rifle up to his shoulder, and it said Cal Fire on the side. What do they need a 50 caliber scoped rifle propped up on the top of their truck for? That was a militarized hit, probably deep underground military bases by whatever group and whatever enclave was holed up there. The people that lived on the surface were probably all people who were employed by the deep underground base there and blended in with regular society. And that was a militarized hit in Paradise. Gatlinburg, Tennessee, all around the world. We haven't digested this yet.
Wait, look at that. The heat was focused on the building. It didn't reach the building from the surrounding trees because they are intact. Look at that.
their best to restore some semblance of normalcy
It's
to this
microwaves
place.
or
A place that is
infrasound,
still shrouded in
directed
beauty,
energy
even
weapon.
though right now it is hard to see.
I'm going to show you one more example. They've had this since the 20s at least. What happened was that Tesla, he informed the government in the 20s, whatever it was, Department of Defense, and offered to give them the technology, but they refused. They refused it.
You might have to stick around to the next part for the
whatever year it was.
spontaneous human combustion.
50 something like that. They
Because I'm about to
confiscated
run
all
out of
his
memory space.
research papers, and took them a couple of years to get it up and running, and then they got it. They tested it on civilians. I'll show you. So these are all from the 50s. It's just a few years after Tesla was died, and they got hold of his research papers. They were able to test it out. They chose lonely old people who lived alone, who wouldn't be missed. And there wouldn't
Those
be
are the
any
legs
witnesses.
sticking
Now you
out the
see
bottom.
The lady's legs here. Let's look at the image a bit better. The lady's legs are, the skin isn't even blackened. Okay? That's raw meat there. And yet here it's completely incinerated, but only here. It's focused. Extreme heat, really focused. What they wanted to
They can put it on.
demonstrate was
Here's
that
a
they could,
teaser because it's going to go to the next video. They put a carrier wave focused on you, a regular radio wave, like the kind that goes through you every day of 96.7 or whatever. And then they send the destroyer wave down the carrier wave, or the protection wave that gives the opposite polarity